So this is a review for the Module 2 test and also a little bit of the review of what we did in the live session today. So you need 3 things. So if you'll pause the video and grab these 3 things and have the tabs ready to go, it'll save you some time. Your succession Venn diagram, your carbon cycle diagram, and your nitrogen cycle diagram. These are things I pass back without grading. I don't need you to turn them back in, but I'd rather you have them to study for, and I wanted to go over them with you. So we have primary and secondary succession here. Remember that in primary succession, this is where we might see a glacier melting and exposing rock, or maybe a volcano erupting and exposing bare rock. So this is where life has never been before or not been before, and there's also no soil belt. So the opposite to that, it would be secondary succession, where we see soil already present. Things like a forest fire or even human interference, like clearing land for apartments or a new shopping mall. In primary succession, again, since there's no soil, it has to be formed before plants can grow. Both primary and secondary succession end with a climax community. They also both have shrubs and trees that grow. They just happen at different times. And whereas the first organisms or pioneer species in primary succession are lichens and moss, the first species or pioneer species, are grasses in secondary succession. So primary succession is where there's not been life before, whereas secondary is there has been. Because we're not starting from scratch, secondary succession tends to be a lot quicker, usually within maybe 30 to 40 years instead of 100 to 200 years. Okay, so if you can pause this, check your answers, and then move on to the carbon cycle. Okay, in the carbon cycle, we see how carbon is neither created nor destroyed. It's just cycles throughout the entire ecosystem. We talk about atmospheric carbon, and if you notice, every arrow is actually pointing out into the atmosphere, except for the ones that have to do with this process by autotrophs. And there's autotrophs that are on land, and there are a lot of autotrophs in the sea and water. So autotrophs go through photosynthesis, which pulls CO2 out of the atmosphere and into the water or into these trees or other autotrophs. And so we see a lot of dissolved carbon dioxide. Everything else, whether we're talking about food chains or food webs, we see carbon being transferred from one organism to another. And as organisms die, carbon's then transferred into the ground and recycled through the process of decay. With pressure and time, we see the formation of fossil fuels, so oil and coal and gas. And all living things go through respiration. So whether we're talking about a fungus, an animal, or a plant, we see respiration for all of these. And then finally, we have some man-made things, combustion and burning of fossil fuels. These two could actually be put in either place, but we also see carbon being emitted to the atmosphere in that situation as well. So you can pause this, and then we'll go on to the nitrogen cycle. The main thing I wanted you to get out of the nitrogen cycle is that 78% of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen. So that's a lot, but it's not in the right form. So we have a lot of different bacteria that help with converting nitrogen into the correct forms. So we have some nitrogen fixing bacteria that are in the roots of plants. We also have some decomposing bacteria. We have fertilizers that help with getting the right amounts of nitrogen to our plants. And we have plants and animals. And the reason that this is so important is because we have proteins and DNA that are made up of nitrogen. So that's our main reason for knowing the nitrogen cycle. We have bacteria that help cycle it.